Who fell before whose feet?
Okay. והעניין. הכתיב, ותיפול לפני רגליו. We sort of skipped here a little piece. כמו שכתוב, let's go back a little bit. שמאלו תחת לראשי בימינו תחבקני. He says, he's really setting us up here for a much, this is like a little corner out of a much larger discussion about what it means to have a relationship with Hashem. It's a very big discussion in Chassidus. Exactly what does it mean? And what does it mean that his left arm, as it were, is supporting my head, and his right arm is hugging me? It's a pasuk from Shir Hashirim that describes how Hashem loves.
You fall on your feet.
Okay.
No?
What?
Without Hashem, you fall flat on your face.
Okay, but we're not talking about whether I'll fall or not. Here we're talking about a person's normal, and he wants to have a relationship with Hashem. He's not falling off his feet. He's not close to dying at the moment. He's okay, but he wants to be uplifted. He wants to be elevated to a higher level. So one of the descriptions is that Hashem puts his left hand under your head. He supports your head, and his right arm he hugs you. So what is this symbol? What is this a symbol for? So he says the left is always a symbol for the fiery love. Rishvei esh ha'ava. You need the left side of love, the left incarnation of love, in order to awaken the mind. Okay? The mind needs. Okay? So the mind, and it's also fire. The mind needs, you call it heat. It needs something to challenge it. What? Enthusiasm. Yeah, you have to get it, worked up.
Right.
Because the mind will normally fall into lethargy. By most people, that's what happens.
Whoever you want, I don't care anything.
Okay. Most people fall into the I don't care state. It was very interesting. In computer science, I don't care is the default state. Don't care. It's even called that. Don't care. I don't care what it is. Whether it's on or it's off, it's 1 or 0. We don't care. And the human being... What?
Sounds exactly like me.
Sounds like every single human being you know. Because people don't care about the mind. What they care about is their feelings. They don't care about the mind, really. They don't really care about the mind. What they care about is their feelings. So people will argue with you politically. They're not arguing politically because there's no sense in what they're saying. What they're doing is they're encapsulating their feelings in a political argument. Or, same thing with religion, right? It becomes that my feelings are now packaged in a religious argument. But the religious argument is bogus. There's nothing there. It's empty. There's nothing that would stand to any kind of scrutiny, to any kind of rational thought. There's nothing there. So because the mind is lethargic. And what really gets it going is when you add some heat to it. So the heat can come from the emotions, or it can come from what we say, a very strong argument in the mind. And the other thing that Hashem does when He creates a relationship with you, okay, is that He uplifts your backside. That's what it means. His right hand is around me. What do you mean around me? He goes to the me'achoraim, from my backside. And he's going to talk about the backside in a moment. The whole idea here is that for a person to be touched by God, for a person to be in a state in which they're no longer just dust of the earth, which again, this is where most people are. They have emotions, they have a lot of feelings, but apart from that, they're not using their minds, and the backside represents they're not using their unconscious.
That's a very sad description, what you're saying.
But that's the description of a regular person in the world.
People are living dead.
Yeah, right. The only thing that makes them feel alive is emotions. They don't get turned on by two things. They don't get turned on by a strong intellectual argument, and they'll say it's because I'm not intellectual. It's not true. Everybody is.
Yeah,
We all have a brain.
I do. Where is it?
Yeah, where is it? You don't see it. Everybody has it. The problem is that it falls into lethargy. That is its normal state. And why is it? Because the brain is cold. That's how it was described in ancient medicine, right? It's cold. Cold means that it's not quick to get excited. But you need to excite it. You need to make it work. Same thing happens with what we call the things that we repress, those things that go into our unconscious, or even not just unconscious in the psychological sense, but even those things that we prefer not to think about. It's not because they hurt us or anything. It's just, I don't want to think about this. I'm not involved. So, for instance,
it's called mind over matter. As long as you don't mind, it doesn't matter.
right. So, most people don't care about what happens to others. It's relegated to they don't even need to suppress it. They don't even need to do anything with it. It just doesn't matter. It makes no difference. I don't care. Yiddishkeit for most people is I don't care. Okay? I'm talking about how many Jews care about Yiddishkeit? Maybe 5%, 6%, 8%, I don't know, something like that. The rest mostly just don't care. It's not that they...
Everybody cares at a certain level on a certain issue.
When it touches you, okay? When it becomes emotional for you. So people who are from a mixed marriage, where one of the partners is not Jewish, so suddenly Jewish identity becomes very, very important to them. Why? Because they really care about Jewish identity? Why? They wouldn't have gotten married to a non-Jew. What they're concerned about is themselves. What they're concerned about is the emotions that it awakes in themselves. And then they make all kinds of arguments. But those arguments are really fueled by their emotions, by what touches them. So he's going to... This is part of a very, very big discussion in Chassidus. What makes a person interested? What makes a person alive? And that's what it means that Hashem has touched you. Okay? Unfortunately, by most people, again, where Hashem touches them is where He doesn't touch them at all. It's where they're touching themselves. It's their emotions. והנה אמרו רז"ל פני מה לא נאמר נון באשרי מפני שיש בה מפלתן של שונאי ישראל שנאמר נפלה לא תוסיף קום בתולת ישראל ואף על פי כן חזר דוד ושמחה ברוח הקודש אמר סומך השם לכל הנופלים. So he says, we have from the sages a very interesting thing. They say that in Ashrei, which has an acrostic, okay, all the letters of the Aleph base are there except for Nun. So why didn't David, who is the master of the Hebrew language, he's the first one who gives us an order for the letters, right in chapter 25 of Psalms, the first time that we ever have an order of letters, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dal, and so on. Why did David not include the Nun? So he says that because the Nun is related to the fall of the Jewish people. He didn't want to give the Nun. The Nun is related to the fall. So what did he do? So he, right after the Nun comes the Samech, and the Samech he mentioned the Nun, and the Samech doesn't just say Somech Hashem, it doesn't say that Hashem upholds, He uplifts everybody. It says He uplifts the fallen, and the fallen is the Nun, Noflim, Somech Hashem lechol hanoflim, the Nun. So that's where it is. What does this have to do with anything? So, what is this strange medrash? What do they want to say? It's a very strange thing. He didn't include the Nun because it means, well, what? What in the world are you talking about?
He gave it a mention in passing.
What are we talking about? So he said like this, Ainyan. So the Alter Rebbe explains this, because you have to explain this in order to understand how Hashem uplifts us. דכתיב, ותיפול לפני רגליו, שבזמן שאין בית המקדש קיים כנסת ישראל בבחינת נפילה. This whole thing of being a Jew, when there's no temple, it's in a state of being fallen. Again, what does it mean that it's fallen? I don't care. I simply don't care. What can it do for me? It's a very sad thing.
Why you say you don't care? Maybe if somebody's house is fallen down, or the best Midrash is fallen down, he's crying at Tikkun Chatzos every single night about it.
Because his house fell down. By most people, they don't care. If a person can bring it to an emotional level where they care because it touches them, then they'll awaken. So when somebody has trouble at home, health problems, this suddenly it becomes very interesting. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that that's when we become interested. So that's a fallen state. A fallen state is when your mind is falling. Who fell here? Who's the Knesset Yisrael? Who's the mother here? Who is the source of all the souls of Am Yisrael? It's the Bina. It's the understanding. It's the Nun. The 50 gates of so these 50 gates have fallen down. And it's not just London Bridge. It's all 50 gates are gone. You can't think. What does it mean you can't think? Of course you can think. You solve 1 + 1 = 2. But you can't think about what really matters. You can't think about Torah. You can't think about Hashem. You can't think about what in life makes life worthwhile. That he can't think about. Those gates are closed. They're torn down for him. So when he's in a state like that, it's called the Knesset Yisrael. The congregation of Israel is in a state of being betrothed. Okay? And in the person it appears as disinterest. As simply being disinterested. The mind doesn't work. And only when there's something very emotional does the mind begin to think. So he says, what this means above, what does this mean by God in the supernal realms? This endei ba'ir. I can't explain fully here. Okay. But we know what it looks like. That we say that Hashem, he's like asleep. That's what it looks like. Like he's asleep.
It looks like to us, it's not for him.
Okay. But that's what it looks like. So what does that mean exactly? He looks asleep.
He's ignoring.
Leave that aside. He says it's too complex.
He's
It
ignoring.
looks like there's no connection. But here below it's very easy to understand what it means. That because the temple was destroyed, we're in a state of slumbering in our minds.
He's going on for too long.
כן. כי הנה במתן תורה כתיב פנים בפנים דיבר הוויה. By Matan Torah, in Parshas V'eschanan, it says, Hashem spoke to you face to face. Unfortunately, in English, face to face means the external face to the external face. It's like two people talking to one another, they see each other's faces. But in Hebrew, panim bepanim means from inside to inside. From where it counts to where it counts. That's how we talk to you. It was internal speech. He touched upon your kishkas. He touched upon your intestines. He touched you where you feel it. By the way, this coming year, Tafshin Pei Bet, is Panim Bepanim. Right? This is the year in which...
Why is it panim bepanim?
Because Panim Bepanim is Pei Bet. Panim Bepanim. Pei Bet. This is the year, the best year, for this to return. The way that Hashem talked to us then.
Okay, so why do
It's
you
an
say-
opportunity.
So why do you think we're all lost if it's the opportunity? Let's grab it.
Said it. That's what we need to do, starting with Rosh Hashanah. You can start preparing for it right now.
Start from Rosh Hashanah on Rosh Elul. It's, you know.
וכן היה כל זמן בית המקדש, אך לא היה בבחינת דיבר השם. There's a small difference, that the whole time of the temple, when the temple stood, there was a state of face-to-face. There was a state of heart-to-heart. But there was no speech. What?
That was only in the first place.
No, even in the second base, the Midrash, that continued. But there was no speech, like he says. There was no speech in the sense that, this needs to be explained exactly what it means, but it's like saying that in the first temple, they didn't have the inner speech of Hashem to develop their understanding of Torah. It didn't come out. For whatever the reason. I don't know what the reason is. But it wasn't like it at Mount Sinai. At Mount Sinai, this heart-to-heart led to words. It led to an understanding. Not just to a connection, but to new understanding that constantly filtered into people's consciousness. And that didn't happen in the first temple. In the second temple, it did begin to filter into their consciousness. The oral tradition began to be built up more than it was at Mount Sinai. I mean, it began to unravel it, if you want, from inside the human soul. But it didn't come from the Beis Hamikdash. It came from outside the Beis Hamikdash. It came from the Torah itself. It was a little bit different because in the second temple there was no ark. And the ark is the source of that speech. In any case, this is a side point. I don't want to get into it. What does it mean that a person has a heart-to-heart with Hashem? So he says, when you talk about the inside of the person, or the face of the person, it means the same thing. It means that the face reflects the inner will of the person. How do we see that? It says in Gashmius it's very easy to see. In the physical form of the human being it's very easy to see. Because where are all the senses? They're on the face. There's no senses on the back of the head. There's no senses anywhere, actually. No, that's touch, but you also have touch on your face. But we're talking about the major senses. Touch is the worst sense of all.
Don't take your face and go touch it.
Can I understand?
Use your fingers to touch.
You do with your lips and with your nose. You do sense touch with your face. In the most important places, you do it with your face. But of all the senses, the touch is considered to be the coarsest. The real senses of the person are the top four. What are they? First of all, sight, then hearing, then smell, and then taste. Those are the real senses. And the most important expression of the person comes from the face, from his speech, from his eyes.
Non-verbal communication.
All that comes from the face. So he says, in the end, the face, that's what we mean when we say that it is the expression, it is where the inner will of the person is located. So what he says? This is where the person's essence is expressed. That's where it is. But everywhere else in the body, we call this the backside. It's not the face. The face is only the face of the head. Everything else, what is it? It's there, but it doesn't express the person. It's not where the person is. So that in Gashmius is easy to understand. What does it mean in Ruchnius? What does it mean spiritually? Psychologically, how is it in the person? Where the person, where his psyche is, the psyche in the sense of what do I want? Okay? Both in expression and in terms of communication, of taking things in. The place where I latch into the world, where I express my wants, my desires, that's in my face. מה שאינו כל כך חפץ ורצון הנפש, אלא על צד הריחך או אגב גררה ובקרירות, הרי זה נקרא מבחינת הרעיים של הנפש שאין שם אלוהיות מועט. But the other things that I don't do consciously, the way we would say this today is that the consciousness of the person is in his face. And the unconscious or the subconscious of the person is everywhere else. So what does it mean that during the time of the temple, God spoke face to face? It was a state of face to face. People were conscious of godliness. They were conscious of what the purpose of life was. Godliness.
You're not conscious of what life is all about? You're not conscious of Hashem?
No, people are not conscious of that today. Me?
Yeah, you.
I'm not an example for anything.
Why not?
Because all I do all day is learn these things.
So then you are conscious.
No, doesn't mean I'm conscious. Just means I know I'm supposed to be conscious. Doesn't mean I'm actually conscious. It doesn't mean that when I come into a difficult situation, I look at it from the perspective of this consciousness. That's what's important is the godliness in my life.
So I come along and tell you a story of a guy who got kicked out of his house because he went crazy and there's no one to look after him. He needs to move to an old age home. You need money to organize it. That doesn't move you. Of course it moves you.
It moves everybody.
So then why do you say that nobody cares?
Because it shouldn't have to take that you would hear a story to be there. You should act like that towards yourself as well. You've been kicked out of your house. How come you don't care about you being kicked out? You feel godliness all day long, so you've been kicked out of Hashem's house. It's the same thing. Why do you not work on it all day long? Why do you not worry about it? Why do people not worry about it? They don't worry about it because they're not conscious of it.
You can't say that about everybody.
I'm not saying everybody altogether, but 99.99% of the people. Of course, there's always exceptions.
But we're dealing with quality, not with quantity.
That doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The base of Mikdash was not quality or quantity. Everybody was welcome. Everybody felt godliness. Everybody went out with a feeling of godliness. That's what it means. In the time of the temple, Hashem was with us face to face because we had consciousness of the divine.
So when Hashem brought the base of English, you have to do that.
You're missing the point. We're not talking about who's to blame and so on and so forth. We're talking about the situation. Okay? Again, so we're talking about consciousness and unconsciousness. We're unconscious. That's what the Baal Shem Tov described. He said, when he came to the world, the Jewish people were like a person who was deeply unconscious.
Okay, so the people who are running a Chabad house, and all they do all day long is bringing people in, bringing Orchim in, helping people, teaching them, doing for people. They are conscious of Hashem, or they wouldn't be doing that. There's nothing to do with the Rebbe. Anybody, Mishak is not Mishak, is totally irrelevant. Somebody is dedicating his life to helping other people. He's conscious of Hashem.
So, let's say. So what?
Because there's nobody.
Again, how many? What are you talking about? 5,000 people in the world?
Doesn't make any difference.
Yes, it makes a huge difference.
Doesn't make any difference.
The world wasn't meant for 5,000 people.
How do you know? Maybe it was.
Then Hashem will destroy the world and leave 5,000 people. He had ample
No.
opportunity to do that, and He doesn't do that because every person who's still alive understands that if these people are still here, Hashem wants us.
Okay, he wants them.
And guess what? You and I are not in the 5,000. So what you're saying is, Hashem has no use for me, and that's not true.
I didn't say that. You
Yes.
say anything even remotely like that.
That's what
Maybe
that's
you
the
are
corollary.
among-
That's the
maybe you are
conclusion.
amongst the 5,000.
I'm not. But again, if I'm not, then I don't serve the purpose of the world. If the purpose of the world is to become conscious of divinity, then I'm not there.
Just because there's 2 billion Chinese who are not saying Moede Ali every morning doesn't mean that Hashem doesn't want them.
Right? He
Yeah,
wants them to.
Yeah.
He does want them
The
to.
others also don't say Moede Ali. Hashem
He
doesn't want
wants
them.
them to. He wants everybody to. Why? Not because he needs it. Because he says you're not a human being until you start doing these things. You're missing your potential. You're not living your life. You have 70, 80 years to live, and you're wasting them
That's
all.
you're giving me?
What?
That's all you're giving me?
120, 150 years to live, and you're wasting it all on satisfying the needs of your body and of your emotions. And you're missing the point of life.
I think it's a bit harsh.
It's very harsh. The destruction of the temple is harsh. It's a very harsh thing.
And there are thousands of good Jews out there. There are all sorts of good
Again,
Jews.
what does it matter if there's still a single person who's not fulfilling his potential? That's wasted. That's a
I don't
waste.
think that we have what do you call it, a duty to go and convert all of the Chinese into stop being
Says you.
worshippers.
Hashem thinks differently. It says you. The base of Mikdash is not just for Jews. It's for everybody. It's for everybody to undergo a transformation, to understand what the life is about. והנה בזמן בית המקדש היה כללות נפשות ישראל בטבעם נמשכים לעבודת השם, לאהבה אותו, לדבקה בו מרצונם וחפצם האמיתי. when the temple was
There.
in its place, the general attitude of the psyche of people, of Jews, was to be drawn to serving God, to love Him and to cling to Him out of their own will, true will. Shezei yikar v'chirut hanefesh, and they saw that this is what fulfills you in life. That's what gives you life. We're not saying that because you'll do this, you'll become Jeff Bezos and have $100 billion in your bank account. That's not what's interesting. Again, if that's what you think, then you don't know why you're alive. Most people think something like that they need a ton of money to be content. That's what will make them happy. And they don't learn from other people's experience that money doesn't make you fulfilled. It simply doesn't.
The base of Migdash was so central for the Batara, to bring everybody panim to panim. So why did Hashem destroy it?
We destroyed it. He didn't destroy it.
He knocked it down. Maybe
No, Babylonians knocked it down. Romans knocked it down. What do you mean he knocked it down?
He gave them permission.
If the purpose of man was to live forever, why do we die? Because Adam decided to do something. And from there on out, we're in this mess. But you eventually have to come out of it.
Okay, well, 2,000 years is too long to go without a base of Migdash.
Is that all? Okay.
Done.
I agree. So what? V'sha'ar tzorchei ha'olam hazeh.
There has to be a substitute for it. If it's supposed to be...
Of course there's a substitute. But the substitute is only open to a small fraction of people.
So that's what Hashem wanted.
What do you mean that's what Hashem... That's
you want to rebuild the base of Migdash.
Okay, so if Hashem wanted you to have tefillin, to put tefillin on, He would have... when you wake up in the morning, the tefillin would fall from the sky. They'd wrap themselves around your arm, and they wrap themselves around your head, and you daven without doing anything. If that's what Hashem wanted. What do you mean that's what Hashem wanted? Hashem commanded. He gave you an option. He also gave you free will. What do you mean Hashem wanted? Hashem wants many things. The universe wants many things. So what if it wants? The only good thing you can say about its wants is that they're not debilitating. It's not like this parent who says, I want you to be a doctor and now I'm going to kill you until you're a doctor. Hashem doesn't do that. The universe doesn't act that way. How does Hashem act? He's patient. He says, in the end, if I want it and you don't want it, it's not worth anything. If we don't want the same things, what's the point of me forcing you? I could create 1 million like you. Except without one part. Their want. And they do exactly what I want them to. So what does that mean? Hashem wants. Who cares what Hashem wants? He doesn't care what He wants. I'm saying this in the best possible meaning. That He doesn't pay attention to what He wants. And He's willing to have patience until the human species and people decide that they want something higher than just to fill their bellies with another piece of meat.
Yeah, I mean, now you're going from one extreme to the other extreme. This is not what people think about. They don't think about the next meal.
Baruch Hashem, that some of the Western world, 2 billion people out of the 7 billion people in the world, don't think about where they're going to get their next meal. The other 5 billion do, or 3 billion, or whatever it is. So comes this satisfied Israeli sits in his plush chair with air conditioning, and he comes and says, I'm not thinking about my next meal. Toda rabah, very nice of you not to think of your next meal. 3 billion people are. So where are we? So it's exactly, you're unconscious. You're unconscious at many levels. I'm not saying that the most important part for you is to worry about what some guy in Africa has now or doesn't have. Because it might be that if that's what you're worried about, you won't be able to help him. And you're only going to make things worse. It might be that the way to help other people is to, first of all, show an example of what it means to be somebody who's conscious. Maybe that's more important. Okay. But you can't say, Just because I'm not thinking about a meal, it means that I've reached the pinnacle of humanity. I haven't. I'm just not thinking about my next meal because we're very wealthy here, relatively speaking. We have more wealth, each one of us, than 99.99999% of humanity before us. We're probably richer than most kings were, each one of us. So what? That's measuring humanity based on its stomach. And we don't want to do that. We're saying that even if you don't have enough to eat, that doesn't matter. The purpose of life can still be met. The meaning in life can still be had. It does not depend on how much wealth you have. It does not depend on how much food you have in the fridge. It depends on other things. And when these other things happen, that's what he's saying, then you reach your potential. Then you feel that life is worthwhile. How many people wake up in the morning and say, life is worthwhile? What? Ken, how many people actually say that and mean it? So out of the 7 billion people in the world, an insignificant fraction actually say it. And out of that insignificant fraction, and let's add to that many righteous people around the world who do feel that they've been blessed and so on, and they thank God, let's say, in the morning. And how many people are there like this? 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 100 million? It's still a fraction. It's a very small fraction of humanity. Okay? So again, the question is, what am I living for? When the Beis Hamikdash was there, it's not that people didn't eat and drink and conduct business and do all kinds of things. Of course they did, because they have to live. The question is, what were they living for? But that was not what life was about. But when the temple is not standing, meaning there's no exemplar of what it means that Hashem is present in reality, then the situation is exactly the opposite. Because then the overwhelming majority of people in the world and overwhelming majority of Jews are drawn to the needs of the body and mundane matters.
Hashem made them.
We're not saying that. It's like saying, but Hashem made me like an animal, so I need to eat grass. I can't cook a meal. Of course, Hashem made you also like with the lowest parts of reality, but you don't live there. You have to go to the bathroom. It's a very sad thing if all that a person thinks about all day is the next pleasure he's going to get from going to the bathroom. That's a very sad existence. That's not what man was meant to be. Okay? If now, the Taliban have now overrun Afghanistan again. Thank you very much, Mr. Biden. Not that I think anybody could have done any better, but you have to hear his statements from just a few weeks ago, that when America withdraws, we're talking about nothing will happen, because there are 300,000 Afghani soldiers. They're well equipped. There's nothing that's going to happen. It's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. We don't have an assessment that says the Taliban is going to overrun. And then when they started withdrawing, it became that within 90 days they would overrun. Then it became 60 days. It became 30 days. It became 72 hours. And it was 72 hours. That's all it took. Why am I saying this? What do I care? Because I care about the human spirit, which is going to be quashed or squashed or whatever it's going to happen to it. I know that the human spirit of 50% of the people there is going to be erased, because at least 50% of the people are women. And they will erase it. There's going to be no human spirit for these people. And the men also. Because Islam, especially the type that the Taliban have, is against the human spirit. It's murderous. It is not willing to let the human spirit develop. It'll tell you what's right and what's wrong, and it'll tell you what's important, but it doesn't realize You can only tell people, you can't force them. And when you force them, you kill them. And that's exactly what they do. If they don't physically kill them, they spiritually kill them. And they can't understand the concept of education. It's beyond them. You don't have to force somebody. You have to teach them. And then they decide. And they may decide this way, may decide that way. I agree, you should teach them. But since they themselves don't really know what to teach, so I don't know what they would even teach them. But in any case, that's what we're looking for. That's what it means that you're inspired by God. That the human spirit develops and it goes somewhere. And that's called that his left hand is under my head, lifting my head, bringing fiery love into the mind, fiery intellectual love, and his right supports me, bringing up from the unconscious all those parts of reality that are very important for my existence, but that because I'm only interested in the mundane, only interested in the next physical pleasure, I put to the extremes. I forget about them.
Yeah.
And that's called.
I'm very swimming.
Very good.